Tom McCarthy, who's the CEO of OrgChart. He's going to be talking about charting success, leveraging your data to provide deeper organizational visibility and insights. Tom McCarthy, everybody.
Appreciate it. All right. Good morning, everybody. So I've got 2 teenage boys at home, so when I get home, I'm going to let them know I had a standing room only audience to try to raise my cool factor. And then they're going to ask me what I spoke about, and I'm going to tell them that it was navigating the future with data-driven insights and workforce planning, and my cool factor will immediately plummet. So I'm going to try to. That might sound like a statistics class at 9:30 in the morning, but we're going to try to make this as fun as we can. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about HR's past, present, and future, the function that HR provides. So HR, look, has always sat on top of the most important aspect of business, and really our most important asset in any company, and that's our people. At my company, over 2/3 of our investment is our team alone, right? And so while we all might make grand plans and great strategies, none of that actually comes to fruition without our team. So that's what we've always done, but what's changed within HR? Well, over the last 10, 15 years, we've had significant advancements in technology and specifically within data science, and that has left HR on top of another critical asset, and one that is increasingly complex, as our people data. And so when you think about our people data, look, data is nice to have, and as kind of Kevin illustrated, is there's a lot of wealth of data out there, and a lot of our HR tools don't really think about how you put that to use, or how you're going to actually consume that. But it becomes the competitive advantage once you start to learn how to do that, and once you start to understand how it can be appropriately managed, understood, and efficiently implemented. And then more importantly, how you take that beyond the data to start to lead conversations as an HR team in your organization on how to make better decisions within your company with that data. So HR today, man, I don't know if there's any department in a company that understands the phrase of doing more with less than our HR team members, right? So you are doing policy making, you're hiring, you're recruiting, you're onboarding, you're updating procedures, you're managing DEI, or maybe you're not managing DEI now. You're managing your own HR team while keeping up with your labor laws, and then of course, fires and more fires. And having spent most of my career as a revenue leader, I will admit that your sales team is probably responsible for half of your fires. So I apologize on behalf of all salespeople. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the fact that how you use that data. And so what we see and what our data shows us is that over 70% of orgs are increasingly adding their investments in data analytics. But yet the vast majority of us don't feel we're doing a good job of actually putting those analytics to use. And that is really where this becomes success, right? So just having your data, great. But putting it to use and figuring out how to lead conversations is really what we want to do. So my name's Tom McCarthy. I've spent the vast majority of my career, actually all of my career in tech. I worked at Dell for the first half of my career and then have done software companies since that at places like Intuit and Xero, and growth stage companies like Pipedrive and now OrgChart. You'll probably never guess, but at OrgChart, we automate your org chart. So we plug into HRIS systems and automate your org visualization. We believe in bringing your people data to life in the org chart because it truly does put the people back into the data that you're seeing. So happy to chat with you at another time about that. So in my role, look, I talk to customers regularly, both our current customers and our prospective customers, about what's going on, how they're using their tools and technology, and what matters to them. And I'm not going to try to read these, partially because I'm over 45 and I cannot read those on the screen anymore. If you're not, welcome to the club at some point. But essentially what we're hearing is like, hey, I've got a seat at the table, but there's all of this data and I don't know what to do with it. Or I have all of this data and I'm spending all my time just trying to figure out how to surface that data and show it to my team. And I've got this wealth of information, but I need to do a better job of figuring out how to. I know I can lead better conversations, but I'm still doing all this work to try to get to where the information is. And so that's really what we want to kind of talk about. So when we talk about building HR for the future, we're going to talk a little bit about how I think about this and how we articulate this at OrgChart. And so we really think about it in a framework of 3 pillars, and how you utilize this data and how you put it to practice. So the first pillar I'm going to refer to as visibility. Now, we believe in actually visualizing this data within the org chart, because when you're sitting down with a VP of a department or a manager and you're having conversations about DEI or or your team tenure, when you actually bring that data to life within the org chart and you have the people and how they connect with each other, we believe it gives a better visibility into the organization. The next one is your insights, and this is really where the data comes in. This is really where you start to think about what are the things that I need to understand. Now, what I kind of articulate this as is different lenses of which you might start to evaluate your organization. So first and foremost, you're looking at your departments and your reporting structure and who's reporting where and where they sit within the organization and how they connect. Then you might start to look at your lens of the organization through a DEI format. Or you might start to have conversations with your finance team and trying to understand it through a budget lens. Or you're having HR planning discussions and you have it with the lens of who your critical talent is, who your key talent is, who's at risk, who's on development plans that you might need to replace at some point. And so you're bringing to life this data and looking at it through different lenses every time. And that's really when you start to think about, look, we can talk all day long about the different data that you can get to, but what you've got to start to think about is what's the lenses and what are the questions and the answers you're trying to get to with that data. And then last, we get into future workforce planning, and I refer to this as vision, right? So you're going to hear a lot about vision within your company, right? Your executive team, your CEO is going to set a vision for the organization, but the reality is there is the way that gets executed is through your team, and the HR team is responsible for helping to craft the vision of what the organization needs to look like in order to accomplish that company vision. So we have our plans, we have our strategic plans, our vision of where we're going, but you need to create the vision of what the organization is going to look like, and you need to help guide the team through those conversations on how to accomplish that. And so we really think about that through these three things, right? And they build on top of each other. You start with your visibility, then you layer in your insights, your data to get those rich lenses of which you can look at your organization. And then you get to your future state, and you take that visibility, those different layers of insights to start to say, hey, how should I structure my organization 1 year, 2 years from now? What are the things I need to be thinking about for my teams? And then how do I start to actually visualize that for my organization of what the future is going to look like in terms of our company? So let's start off. We're going to talk a little bit about those lenses now with those pillars with a framework of maturity. Now, what that is and isn't, first of all, okay? So when I think about saying HR maturity, I'm thinking more of the depth of which you go do these things, right? I'm not saying that you are right or wrong. It's not a measure of success. It's a measure of what's right for you and your organization at the state that you're in today, right? So one thing that we know for sure is that every business is different. We all have different complexities. We all have different strategies. We have infinitely varied missions. And so what's right for one company is not going to be right for another. So as I start to talk about these things, it is you thinking about what is right for your organization and what your organization is ready for. Simple as that, okay? So first, let's start with visibility. So first, foundationally, you guys are responsible for knowing and communicating the current state of the organization, our reporting relationships, our functional areas and responsibilities, compensation, geographic locations, our titles, our headcounts by department, etc. It's a lot of wealth of information and bringing the visibility into the organization, and the organization is always going to look to HR for those answers. You're going to get questions like, hey, can you provide me an updated org chart for the marketing department or for everyone in the Toronto office? Could you tell me how the dotted line reporting structure in our IT department looks today? What's the contractor ratio to full-time ratio to part-time ratio of any given team? So when you start to provide this visibility, you're doing a few things. One, you're increasing transparency. Okay, you're bringing the lights on into the organization of who sits where, who's doing what the team's looking like. You're bringing more visibility to your leaders to understand the makeup of their teams and what they might need to change or do differently about it. I think a lot of organizations get scared about revealing some of this data, right? But it doesn't have to be everything, right? So it doesn't mean radical disclosure. It means the right level of disclosure and figuring out what you want to share within the organization. So a recent Deloitte report stated that 88% of HR leaders recognize the importance of increasing visibility, but only half of us are taking the steps to actually materially increase that. When we start to do that, look, I start to think about early stage, you're really just bringing visibility into the organization. You have loosely defined processes. I'm not going to go through every one of these. We'll share this content with you if you want it at the end. But as you get into mid-stage, you're getting into some different lenses of which you look at the organization. You're dealing with regulatory compliance. You're starting your HR practice applications. And then in late-stage maturity, you're really looking at the different views within your organization that you're trying to do. You're thinking about the culture of continuous feedback. You're looking at constant ways in which you can improve the organization through that. As we move forward and we get into insights and analytics, now this is where I talk about the different lenses of which you're looking at your organization. So first, it's the breakdown of data. Now that data can include a wealth of information. It's going to include your budget. It's going to include your budget, your compensation, and your compensation relative to the market. It's going to include DEI information, tenure location, and location information. Okay, so, but you have to become the sense makers of this data. And so if you're spending all of your time just trying to look for the data, then you're not being able to help make sense of the data. So you're going to get asked questions like, hey, can you run a DEI report for each department? How is pay distributed across my marketing department and function? And how does that actually compare to our budget? And how does it compare to our market? And are we competitive in the market? Or are we making risks of retaining our key talent? What's the average employee tenure on our product team? And do we have product development pods that have more tenure than others? And should we consider restructuring those pods to spread that tenure around to elevate the experiences within those teams? But if you can't get to that data easily, then it's hard to ask those questions and actually lead your team through those decisions. So when you have this data and these insights, then you drive your business results and you drive better decisions. So things like compensation, where you're spending your money, where you're investing, which talent you're investing in. DEI, ensuring that you have a diverse workforce that creates different views and points of view in order to make better decisions. You think about your key talent and your critical talent, where they sit within the organization. Are they moving along in their career and in succession planning and career pathing for them? So these are all questions that you begin to be able to better answer when you're taking a look at the insights through different lenses. And then another thing that I'll kind of call out is like, look, from trends perspective, if you think this is going anywhere, and obviously everybody in this room is here for a reason, and we all know that this is, but Global Market Insights reported that in just North America alone, the HR analytics market was valued at $3.7, almost $4 billion in 2023. By 2032, it's expected to be over $11 billion. So we're only going to continue investing more in this, and so it's the opportunity to continue to learn and grow in it and how you're going to actually put this to work. So again, as you first start out and you're starting to do this, you're looking for maybe early detection and correction of negative employee patterns or experiences. You're dipping your toes in the water on this. As you get into mid-stage maturity, you're starting to think about your key processes. You're tracking those and how you refine them. You're thinking about compliance monitoring. You're trying to actually start to think about accurately forecasting your staffing needs and understanding what your requirements are going to be in the future for maybe your support team or your implementation teams or your development teams. As you start to get into more late-stage maturity, you're going to get into more accurate trend predictions. You're going to get into more future model scenarios. You're going to actually start to think about optimizing your organization for your strategy as well. So how do you take the strategy for next year and optimize the organization for that? If you are in tougher economic times and you're needing to do a 10% reduction in force, well, how do you model that within the organization? And what are all the data and insights that you should be looking at as you make those decisions? I've sat in the room many times, especially in my career at Dell and other larger enterprise companies, where we're having to do reduction in forces. And to be honest with you, like a lot of the times, because of the lack of data and insights, you get a lot of bias into those conversations. You get a lot of just assumptions on things. But when we can actually take the views of the organization and we start to layer in these data and insights, then we start to bring more intelligence, and you try to take some of those personal biases out of the decisions and the conversations that you're having. Same thing can be true when you're starting to think about growth. Let's say the company is growing and you're going to grow your headcount 10, 15, 20% in the next 2 to 3 years. Same conversations, right? Really being able to guide the organization and showing them the data and the insights that exist within your organization of where the gaps and where the opportunities are in your organization versus who's going to campaign the loudest for headcount and their team's needs. Your job is to help take some of those biases out by utilizing these data to guide the conversations. And this is when you're really getting into late stage maturity. These are the things that are happening within the organization that you're able to lead when you're utilizing the data effectively. And then the future workforce planning, I really prefer to talk about this as vision, but it's your org design, it's your workforce planning, it's the future state of the organization of where you're going. Now, what I will say is, first of all, you can't do this without the first two things. So if you don't have visibility in the organization and you don't have your data and insights, it's really hard to talk in an effective way about the future state of the organization. The inimitable Yogi Berra once said that if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else. Now, while a great yogiism is always perfect, I'm going to amend that slightly and say that if you don't know where you are, it's damn near impossible to figure out where you're going. And so when we talk about the first two things, that is the prerequisite to starting to talk about the future state of your organization. If you don't have clear visibility and you don't have the different insights, the different lenses of which you need to evaluate your organization, you can't effectively make decisions about your future. But you're going to get requests like, could I see the succession planning across each department? We need to have the growth product team model. We need them to see a reduction in force next year. What's the impacts of that? Where should that be? How do we have that conversation? Could you make recommendations for changes to our management structure to better improve our efficiency next year? Where are our gaps? What could we do differently? So proper HR planning requires the HR team to collaborate with our department leaders. And I'll be honest with you guys, your department leaders don't know how to ask these questions correctly. They don't know how to think about these things. So they will ask you a question sometimes, but you're spending so much time getting to the answer that you're not helping them to understand what they should be thinking about based on that question. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is make that easier for you to get to that data. So this allows you to really better help guide them through what's the roles and skills of your current organization. What's the roles and skills necessary to meet your business objectives in the next 12 to 24 months? And then how and where do those skills need to be deployed across our team? Look, from a roadblock perspective, if you don't do this, then poor visibility, poor insights, poor lenses within your organization, as Yogi said, leaves you someplace else. So that's really what we're trying to do to be able to help you with. Gartner actually said that 67% of leaders are not yet effectively utilizing their data. And then Aon had said that 45%, nearly half of companies, are assessing employees for agility, adaptivity, and digital skills. So less than half. So this is, again, an area where we can continue to improve upon. So early stage, look, when you're thinking about future state of the organization, you're mainly just reactively responding to organizational needs. You're filling back positions. You're trying to attend staffing needs quickly. You're starting to track your data and your headcount tracking, but you're not doing a lot of predictive usage. You're at mid-stage really getting into talent pipelines. You're starting to identify the skill gaps within your organization. You're improving the sophistication of your analytics. Late stage is really where we talk about the things that we've been discussing, of the maturity of which you're really layering in these insights into the future state of the organization. So you are your organization's true competitive advantage. Now, the asterisk I put on that is really tied to if you're putting these things to use. So if you're taking the things you're learning here today, if you're taking the data and insights, the people analytics that you have, and you're learning how to effectively put those into use for your company, and where I would say that the real value happens is not in providing this data, it's in quickly providing the data and leading the conversations of how the team should be thinking about this data, right? And like that's really where the value of this room resides. It's not in the data, it's not in the insights that you give the organization. It's in your expertise of people and the conversations that this data can help you lead and guide and reinforce. In conclusion, That's what we do here at OrgChart. I'm going to give you one small pitch of that. We will help you automate this and visualize your data in more effective ways. Please feel free to download a more in-depth ebook on this topic. And we've got a booth in the room. Our banner is stuck somewhere in customs, so you'll find us, though. We're the one without one. So happy to chat with any of you at any point today or tomorrow on how we could potentially help you.
Tom, please. So I think we have a few minutes for questions. I'm sure everyone was taking notes. Really fascinating prez. Any questions for Tom off the bat? When you wait, usually a hand goes up. I'll get us going. Oh, I see a hand, a brave hand. Oh, let's wait for a mic runner, sorry.
Thank you. Hi. Can you hear me now?
You're good.
Okay. I just wonder, I fully agree with you that the value is in leading that conversation. And this conversation, depending on the organization, might be led by the HR business partners or the people analytics partner, or a combination of both, or like what is your outlook of that?
I think it's a combination of both, and I think it depends on the size of your organization, whether or not you have a separate people analytics department or not. But it should be both, right? And as an HR team, your people analytics portions, the people who are doing BI for your team, you should be talking to them about how to think about this data, right? So I can tell you as a CEO, when I'm working with my BI team on the business as a whole, I'm not just simply asking that team to think about what data I'm asking for, but I'm asking them to learn, I'm teaching them how to learn, how to think about that data. What are the business problems and challenges I'm trying to answer with that data? When you look at the data, what do you see within that, right? And so I think it's really important that your reporting teams within HR understand the mission of what you're trying to do, that they understand the value of this data and the questions you're trying to answer, so that they're not, like, real value in an analytics team does not come from just the reports itself, but from their ability to start to surface the right insights from that data. With that means your HR partners that are working with your leaders need to be working closely with the analytics team so that they understand that concept, right? I think it has to be tied together.
I have a question, Tom. Actually, in the work that we do at Icona, so many times we see HR organizations trying to kind of assemble and catch up when it comes to infrastructure and data and insights, depending on where the business is going. How do you see that playing out? Are you trying to help companies kind of catch up from a maturity standpoint based on where the business is, or kind of invest for where they're going?
Yeah, I mean, we at OrgChart, we definitely are thinking about that, right? And I think Kevin kind of illustrated the fact that a lot of the HRIS systems are not thinking about how you're actually consuming that data. Right. What we find is that when HR professionals come to talk to us, half the time they're still manually creating just the visibility of the organization, right? The org chart. We are trying to make that much easier to surface that data, to save it the way you want and automate it. Our goal is to reduce. What we're trying to figure out, and I think that you're going to continue to see going forward, is the ease of getting that information in the lens that you want it, continuing to improve. We're working on that. I believe others are working on that. I think some of the HRIS systems are slow on that, but I think you're going to continue to see that evolve rapidly. And I think advancements in AI, you're going to start to get to where you're going to see abilities to just simply query, hey, can you tell me what the ratio is of my team on contractor to full-time, for instance, and get those answers quickly. So what I would say is that we need to get better about, in this room, is asking better questions and trying to understand what we want out of the data. I think the ease of access to that data is going to infinitely improve in the next 5 years.
Right. I think we have time for one more question. See a hand in the back.
Hi, I'm Nick, workforce specialist with Peel Region. You spoke about the maturity levels of how we have something that we could have been and something that we're going towards. And in the people analytics space, right, the maturity is also for the people who are involved in that people analytics, right? Do you have a plan or a vision for the training and the learning for the people involved in people analytics? Because everything around is also changing, right? At
Yep.
the same time. So just curious about that.
Yeah, I think the question was, how are we thinking about training the people analytics teams? Is that more of what you're saying? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, that is not my area of expertise, so I won't try to say that. What I will say is I'm going to go back to the first question of what I would actually argue is more important than the training of how to get to the data is the questions and the discussions we need to be leading as we look at that data. I do think it's hard right now to get to the data. I don't think it's intuitive or easy in a lot of capacities. I do think that's going to dramatically change in the years ahead. But I think that the ability of asking the right questions is going to be the constant, right? That's going to be where the real value is. And so if I was focusing on this right now in any one of your companies, where I would be focusing on is really teaching your people analytics team the questions they need to be asking, the things we need to be thinking about in HR in order to make our most important asset more effective, right? And I think helping them ask better questions is going to be more important than teaching them how to get to the data.
Great. Well, everybody, why don't we give it up one more time for Tom?
Thanks, everybody.